Happy Wednesday to you, another wet, chilly spring day here. I want to share with you something that happened today. I was out for my 5K run. As usual, I typically go out around 8:15 or so, and I was just coming down Milltown Boulevard by Horizon and Granville Apartments, and a van pulled up, turned left in front of me into one of the apartments there, and kind of rolled down the window and said, "Excuse me," and I kind of slowed down and stopped my run on my watch and said, the gentleman inside the van said, "Is that you?" And of course, there's a sign of me right there on the lawn. And I said, "Yes, that is me." And I love this. I don't know that I'm encouraging just corralling me on my 5K run on a regular basis. But I am open to it. So I stopped, and the gentleman right away said, "Well, if that is you, tell me, what's your deal? Why are you running for mayor?" And I really, one of those things is, okay, well, I want to hear what you think the town needs, but I like to start from a place of what are the needs of the town? And then that should be answering and informing why I'm running for mayor. And so kind of today, I wanted to talk to you about what I told him, because it dovetails so nicely on what I said yesterday I wanted to talk about over the next few days. Because there are a lot of priorities we have in our town. If you haven't seen this postcard yet, there it is. Those are what I believe are the priorities. But you'll notice at the top, the roads and the hotel. Okay, so those are investments that we believe are moving forward. Future St. Stephen, the work of Future St. Stephen, which I described yesterday, and the reason why I did that is because they have been working so hard on attracting new economic development. And the hotelier is part of that, and the dock apartments is part of that. So Future St. Stephen does that really incredible work. You need to know about them. That is the Municipal District of St. Stephen's Economic Development Agency, okay? So, the hotel and the roads are on there for sure. Roads, $5 million are being borrowed to kind of amortize the loan and spread out the burden in terms of paying it down over time, okay? But what we are left with is a bit of a hairball challenge. The next challenge, I believe, for St. Stephen is a kind of systems issue of several things impacting each other at the same time. So what I said to Randy, we ended up introducing ourselves. Yeah, my name's Mark. Well, my name's Randy. And Randy really, right away, I said, "Randy, what I believe is the linchpin of what needs to happen next in St. Stephen is solving our housing, the low housing stock, the inadequacy of housing." And so that's why right on top here, our housing supply or our housing stock, as I mentioned yesterday. Now, why do I lead with housing? Why is housing the first thing? Now, I want to say, I keep interrupting myself because I'm so excited here. Randy did astutely ask, housing for who? And that is a really important question. And I said, housing for everyone. What we need to understand is what happened to housing and housing supply all across New Brunswick, but especially in St. Stephen, and how that impacts the other priority sectors, I would say, things that St. Stephen really needs to tackle aggressively in the next council's term. And that is, businesses do need to feel more welcome and supported in terms of what they need and what the downtown needs to be. Okay, so it's not just the downtown, but downtown revitalization is a part of that. The BIA, the Downtown St. Stephen Business Improvement Area. Sometimes I use that jargon, and I try not to use jargon or acronyms. So the Business Improvement Area is that stretch along Prince William Street and then King Street up to Guardian. And there is a levy. I want to talk more about them in days to come, but without going too much down the rabbit hole of the BIA. But businesses need to be supported in the downtown BIA area, but also any business that wants to come to town and set up anywhere in the municipality, whether it's the rural district or the business park or that kind of thing. Again, Future St. Stephen is working on that. But we need our businesses to feel more supported, more welcomed, and that has to do with public safety. Now, public safety is a result of, in large part, we have crime, we have break-ins, we have theft. That has felt like it's on the rise. The RCMP, I believe, statistically might have other things to say about that. But when we have to start locking up our homes and not sure when we come home, hopefully we didn't leave the door open. We have reports of theft and things like that. And sometimes it seems like it's theft on a large scale. Somebody really planned it. Sometimes it feels like petty theft. But public safety, I ran on this as a candidate for MLA in 2024, and here we are in 2026, still talking about it. Now, some of that is from people who are experiencing homelessness, being in the downtown, loitering, and that sense of, I don't feel safe walking in that area, mostly because I'm never one to demonize or other people who are experiencing homelessness. I will never do that for political purposes or otherwise. But I do believe that the average resident of St. Stephen feels like when someone is experiencing a mental health episode or is under the influence of a substance, to put it in vernacular, like high out of their mind or something like that, literally like not in their right mind, a lot of people feel threatened. And so we need to solve that as well. But I believe all of that stems from needing more housing. The kind of watershed of solving those interlocking issues is going to be, let alone tourism, let alone taxes. And I've talked about, building up St. Stephen in a smart and sustainable way. I believe that when we focus on housing and getting everyone housed, we will see improvements in the other areas. That is not to say we only focus on housing and take our eye off the ball on other things. I have heard of candidates just saying, we just need the business community to thrive. We need to focus on business and economics. Well, think about what happens if you just focus on businesses. Then you are not having enough housing stock for people to set up businesses. And of course, we are seeing all across North America, the zeitgeist right now, what we're seeing in this moment is more online shopping is actually really hurting brick and mortar mom and pop stores, right? Because of rents and things like that. Even sometimes people who just have brick and mortar stores, they move completely to online. And that is not the recipe to a revitalized downtown. Ideally, in a downtown space, you would see a shop that is supported, the pressure of making sales and finding customers is alleviated by having residential units on top. That's the kind of development you want to see downtown. That's the kind of development we've seen in small towns like ours for a century at least. This is how businesses supported themselves going back thousands of years, not to be too dramatic, but having your residents attached to your business, we want to see more of that. So I want to talk a little bit about, what I would call the housing activity loop. When I talk about why housing is so crucial to addressing the other problems. When you have businesses, then you have more public safety and that kind of thing. Like I say, I really believe housing is the watershed. That's my stance on this. I'm open to having more discussions with you around this. Really fired up after my discussion with David of Future St. Stephen yesterday, because that is the priority there as well. We want things like a clinic and the downtown and none of these things can we take our eye off the ball. But here's what I believe to be the housing activity loop. I'm just calling, I like to give things names. I have my own business. I'm in marketing. Here's what happens when you kind of have a housing activity loop. When we get more housing, and to Randy's point, more what kind of housing? Well, we need more housing stock. We need more new housing developments, more apartments like the Dock. We need the Starshine properties to be cleared up and to be renovated and have people in there. We need to take all the pressure off of the shelter, the only game in town for people who are really experiencing financial hardship and don't have a home. We need to get bridge housing for them. We need transition housing for them all along the continuum. right? That is what we need. But first, when we get housing, then there will be more people in town. When there are more people in the municipality, whether that's rural or the urban zone, the municipal district of St. Stephen, then there are more customers, more people who need to buy things. When there are more customers, then there are more businesses willing to open up, not just food stores, but maybe hardware and clothing and supplies and things like that. And when you have more customers, then you have a more active downtown. This is one thing that we want St. Stephen to start kind of densifying our downtown. There's too many open lots with literally no buildings on them. This is something future St. Stephen is working on. But there's also storefronts that are completely empty. Why is that? Is that just because there are people who are experiencing homelessness and people maybe don't feel safe walking around downtown? Maybe some of it is that. But again, to be honest, show me a small town that doesn't have empty storefronts. We need to address that. How do we address that? I'm going to go back. We need housing. We need more human beings and families and retired folks and tourists, all that in town. And the way to address that is more housing. So where were we? I shouldn't interrupt myself when I'm talking about a loop. So we have housing, then that brings more people brings more customers bring more business brings more activity to downtown, and more activity in a downtown area, more activity on the street, more people walking, which is why we need good roads and sidewalks as well. But that leads to more eyes on the street, as Jane Jacobs talks about. If you know anything about Jane Jacobs, she is an urban planner, famous author. She is an absolute delight. Google her, read her book if you haven't. Really wonderful things to say about societies and communities and how we plan our neighborhoods and cities and towns. More eyes on the street leads to more public safety. Now, we can have measures like camera incentive programs and things like that. I know downtown St. Stephen, the BIA has been active in that, but the municipality can also talk about security patrols, things like that. I want to talk to you about this in the days to come, things that like St. John are doing. Obviously, we can't do things on a city scale in terms of budget, but a community safety service with officers on patrol at certain times. But then once you have more a sense of public safety, then you will have more people wanting to visit and live, work, play, raise families, retire in St. Stephen, and then you will get housing filled up and et cetera, et cetera. There's your loop. That's why I call it the housing activity loop, because when you have housing, there's activity being generated, not just economic activity, but social activity and literally people walking around on the street, which makes everyone safer. That's why we need, again, to alleviate pressure from the shelter, help the businesses feel supported, help people feel safe, whether those business owners opening their doors or walking home from work, more people milling around downtown. Housing is what unlocks that. And we're seeing also this bizarre kind of log jam where developers are wanting to come to St. Stephen. I was told this in a conversation with a decision maker. And when a developer comes and says, okay, I'm considering opening up more housing in St. Stephen, creating a development, but how's that homelessness situation, which was like provincial or national news for the last couple of years? And of course, right now, the answer is we've only got a shelter. This, to me, to be honest, is a failing of the current council, leadership, administration. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. If I were in council and it took this long, if I were the mayor, I would say it's a failing. I would say if the province was providing funding and we just couldn't get our act together around where to put these people, where to put bridge housing, how to close down the shelter ultimately without, very absurd, unrealistic solutions like move it outside of the municipality or that kind of thing. We have people to take care of. We have people to see get clean. We have people to see move into the healthcare system and detox and rehab. That is a whole thing. But we need housing to help with all those interconnected needs of St. Stephen. Housing, quick stats as I promised from the Human Development Council. New Brunswick experienced some of the highest rent increases in Canada. From 2020 to 2024, rent rose by 35%. The cost of rent rose by 35%. During the pandemic, the MLS average residential sale price was stable, but then from 2019, in the decade before the pandemic, and then since the pandemic, 2019 to 2024, it increased by 84%, the cost of listings across New Brunswick. In 5 years, the residential property price doubled. Okay, in 5 years in that time. Vacancy rate is, New Brunswick is experiencing some of the lowest vacancy rates in decades. In 2024, it was 2%, even lower than that in our municipality. The number of unsubsidized units that cost less than $750 in rent dropped by 25% from 2016 to 2021. This is a loss of housing stock. Can you imagine how much more true that is with our Starshine crisis here in St. Stephen? And the housing stock in New Brunswick, last stat, grew 7% in this period, but the population grew 12%, which leads to a gap in housing, right? There's more people, not enough houses. So if we want to grow, keep our tax base low, replace aging infrastructure, we need more people. We need more people for more customers, for more businesses, for more activity downtown, for more public safety. How are we going to do that? We've got to stop the housing logjam. Now, thankfully, it's not a mayor's job to do all that. It is a mayor's job to harmonize the efforts of all the amazing agencies and work and people who are doing that and communicate that to you. That's what I'll do as your mayor. That's what I'm going to start doing tomorrow. I want to expound a bit more on 4 agencies whose job it is to continue to stimulate economic activity and for businesses and housing. And I want to kind of start sharing that out with you over the next few days as we talk about how interconnected all these things are for the betterment of St. Stephen as we move forward into the next future of challenges and solutions together. BuildUpStStephen.ca, that's my website. Take care of yourself today. Take care of your neighbor. Thank you, Randy, for corralling me. It was a great opportunity to talk to you and then share on this video today. Have a great rest of your day. Let's build up St. Stephen together. Cheers.